The blue flame on the gas stove was still burning when my grandfather pushed the door open. He slowly turned the knob. A click, and the fire died amid the smell of steak. "Stove's off. Now tell the truth," he said, his voice low and sharp. I stood against the counter, my wrist still red from my stepmother's grip, while my father pretended to stir sauce. This party was supposed to honor the golden boy, but that stove was about to become the place my family's lies were exposed. My name is Hope Chavez. The party was in full swing, or at least Lydia's version of it. Our kitchen in Riverton, Colorado, was a monument to gleaming, cold surfaces, stainless steel, brushed nickel, and a vast expanse of white quartz on the island that Lydia wiped down obsessively, as if erasing any evidence of actual life. Tonight, it was covered in flutes of champagne, the cheap kind, but in expensive glasses, and platters of appetizers I had spent the morning arranging. The air was thick with the competing smells of seared steak and Lydia's gardenia-scented candles. This entire performance was for Caleb, my stepbrother, Lydia's son, the anointed heir, had landed an internship. Not just any internship. Lydia had been braying to the neighbors for weeks, but a prestigious one, the fact that it was with one of my father's golfing buddies, and that the position likely involved more coffee fetching than high finance, was a detail lost in the glitter of the celebration. My father, Mark, was stationed at the enormous 8-burner Wolf Range. He wore an expensive-looking linen apron and was flamboyantly searing a piece of tenderloin, the blue flame licking up the sides of the pan. He laughed, a short, sharp sound, at something our neighbor, Mr. Dalton, said. It was his public laugh, the one that didn't reach his eyes. Mark was always performing. Lydia was the director. She glided through the clusters of people, her silk blouse whispering, her fingers, tipped with blood-red nails, straightening a napkin here, tilting her head in feigned interest there. She was a master of this stage, and everyone in it was a pawn, including me. I was on dish duty, clearing away the small plates smeared with brie and fig jam. I moved quietly, a shadow in the bright, track-lighted glare of the kitchen. My name is Hope Chavez, and I'm a data analyst at Northbury Analytics. I find patterns in chaos. I build models to predict outcomes. And here, in my own home, I was the most predictable, most exploited variable. I kept my left sleeve pulled down. The cuff of my gray sweater bunched securely over my wrist. The skin underneath was an ugly mottled purple-red, a perfect handprint from where Lydia had grabbed me this morning. The argument had been the same one we always had, just louder. The dealership for the new Audi had called. A processing issue, they'd said. The truth was, Mark and Lydia's credit was stretched as thin as the artisan crackers on the counter. Caleb, of course, had no credit at all. That left me, my steady salary, my perfect credit score. My name was supposed to be on the cosign line. I had said no. That's when Lydia's mask of the gracious hostess had melted away. "Ungrateful," she'd hissed, her face close to mine. "After everything we've given you." And then the grab, her fingers digging into the bone of my wrist, yanking me closer. "You will not ruin this for him." Now she materialized at my elbow, the scent of gardenias washing over me, suffocating. The noise of the party, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the sizzle from the stove, faded to a dull roar. "Go put your coat on," she whispered, her voice a venomous sliver under the pretense of a smile. "The presentation is in 5 minutes." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "What presentation?" Lydia's eyes narrowed. "Do not play dumb with me. Hope, it is a bad look. You are giving Caleb the keys. We will have a united front." She leaned in, her hot breath on my cheek. "Tonight, you will hand the keys to that Audi to your brother, and you will look happy doing it. Do not you dare embarrass this family." A few feet away, Mrs. Dalton, draped in a cashmere shawl that probably cost more than my first car, was talking to another neighbor. "They are just the perfect family, aren't they?" She sighed. "So blended, So supportive. Mark and Lydia have done such a wonderful job with both children, such unity and success. Unity. I almost laughed. The sound that came out was more of a choked breath. I turned my head, the motion just enough to catch my own reflection in the dark glass of the wine fridge. I looked pale, tired. I was just a backdrop, a piece of scenery to make their story look better. I was the responsible, quiet daughter, the financial mule carrying the weight of their extravagant lies. This party, this house, this entire life, it was all built on my silence and my signature. As Lydia spoke, as the neighbors gossiped, my mind was not on the car, or the bruise, or the charade. It was on an email that had landed in my inbox 3 days ago, from a law firm I had never heard of, Roan and Pike, LLP. The subject line was simple: Walt Chavez Trust, Activation Inquiry. I had opened it, my heart hammering. My grandfather, Walt, my father's father, was a ghost in this family. He'd left Riverton years ago, disgusted by what he called my father's hollow charade. He sent me postcards every Christmas, always with a cryptic, handwritten note. Don't let them grind you down, kid. A spine is a terrible thing to waste. The email from Harper Pike, the lawyer, was concise. It informed me that the trust my grandfather had established for me years ago, a trust I barely knew existed, was not some minor college fund. It was substantial, and it was mine, solely mine. The entirety of the Walt Chavez Trust, the email read, is designated to you, Ms. Hope Chavez, as the sole beneficiary. Your father and his current spouse are explicitly, by name, barred from access or oversight. It was a fortress, and the lawyer had included one more thing. Your grandfather established this under very specific duress clauses. Any attempt to coerce, pressure, or seize control of your assets triggers an immediate lockdown and review. Please be advised, you are fully empowered. Hope, did you hear me? Lydia's voice was sharp, pulling me back. Across the room, Caleb, the man of the hour, had finally disengaged from a cluster of his own friends. He was holding his phone, the screen glowing. Check it out, he was saying, his voice loud, arrogant, and slurred just slightly from the champagne. The A4, black on black. They're detailing it for me right now. He swiped through a gallery of photos from the dealership's website. He looked up, his eyes finding mine across the island. He grinned, a slick, entitled expression that mirrored his mother's. Hope's getting it for me. She's got the cash. He didn't see it as co-signing. He saw it as a gift. He saw me as a bank. And in that moment, watching him preen, watching Lydia watch him with that predatory pride, watching my father burn a $200 piece of meat to impress people he despised, I felt the last thread of my fear snap. The pattern was clear. The data was all there, and the prediction was no longer in doubt. Tonight, the answer was no. I was still holding a stack of dirty plates. I turned to walk to the sink, to put them down, to walk to the coat closet and get the empty Audi key fob Lydia had placed there, and to walk back and begin the scene that would end this. But I never made it. The sizzle of the steak, the crackle of the gas flame, the high-pitched laughter of Mrs. Dalton, it all stopped. Not gradually, but all at once. The front door had opened. It wasn't a guest. All the guests were here. The air that washed into the overheated kitchen was cold, smelling of the sharp Colorado night, of pine and impending snow. A silence, thick and heavy, moved from the hallway into the kitchen. And then he was standing there. Walt Chavez, my grandfather. He was not supposed to be here. He had not set foot in this house in at least 5 years, not since Lydia had redecorated and erased every trace of my mother. He was wearing a heavy tweed coat, the kind he always wore, and his face was lined and weathered. He looked, as he always did, like a man who had never told a lie in his life. In his left hand, he held a thick 9x12 manila envelope. Lydia's painted-on smile froze, cracking at the edges. My father, Mark, went pale, his hand hovering over the stove, the spatula dripping grease onto the gleaming cooktop. "Dad," he said, his voice a strangled whisper. Caleb, for the first time, looked up from his phone, his expression of arrogant boredom twisting into confusion. Walt said nothing. His eyes, a clear, piercing blue, swept the room. They took in the neighbors, the champagne, the overladen island. They rested on Lydia, who looked like she had seen a ghost. They found my father, and I saw a flicker of something, not anger, but a deep, profound disappointment. Finally, his eyes met mine. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then he moved. He walked past the stunned neighbors, who parted for him like the Red Sea. He walked past the island, past Lydia, who actually took a step back. He walked straight up to the wolf range where my father stood, paralyzed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture. He simply reached out a hand gnarled from work, not golf, and grasped the stainless steel knob for the main burner. The click of the knob turning was the loudest sound I had ever heard in my life. The blue flame beneath the stake sputtered, hissed one last time, and died. The smell of raw gas and cooling meat filled the sudden, absolute silence. The only sound in the entire house was the low, electric hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator. My father was sweating, the expensive linen of his apron now stained. Walt turned, just slightly, to face the room. He still held the thick envelope. His voice was not loud, but it cut through every corner of that kitchen, sharp and cold and true. "When the flame goes out," he said quietly, "you see who's really burning. This is Riverton, Colorado. It is not so much a town as it is a carefully curated performance of wealth. We are a collection of immaculate lawns, each blade of grass standing at attention, identical in its expensive, chemically induced green. Our streets are named after trees that no longer grow here, Elm Circle, Willow Creek Pass, and they curve around man-made lakes whose water is dyed a color blue that does not exist in nature. This is a place where ambition is not just encouraged, it is landscaped, pruned, and chemically treated until it conforms to the neighborhood association's guidelines. Every house has a 3-car garage, every driveway is swept, and every window is a mirror reflecting the identical perfect house across the street. Our house, the one at the end of the cul-de-sac on Aspen Court, is one of the biggest. It is a sprawling, modern traditional hybrid with a gray stone facade, dramatic exterior lighting, and a front door that looks like it belongs on a small castle. From the street, it is the pinnacle of Riverton's success. It is a statement of stability, of taste, of power. It is also a lie. The house is a voracious, bleeding wound. We are so far underwater on the mortgage that we are practically on the ocean floor. The dramatic exterior lighting is on a timer to save money, and the second mortgage Mark took out to pay for the quartz countertops is currently in default. The facade is not just stone, it is a theatrical flat, and behind it, the structure is rotting. My father, Mark Chavez, is the architect of this illusion. He was once a legitimate power player, a senior vice president at a downtown Denver bank. He wore bespoke suits and had a corner office on the 42nd floor, but that was a long time ago. That was before the restructuring, which was a polite word for the investigation into his creative asset management. He wasn't fired, not officially. He was given a golden parachute and a non-disclosure agreement, and he has been in freefall ever since. He now consults, a vague term that seems to involve a lot of golf with men who are still employed, and a lot of time in his home office staring at a locked computer screen. Mark lives on the fumes of his former authority. His entire existence is a desperate performance of the kind and powerful man he used to be. He is generous with restaurant tips he cannot afford. He laughs the loudest at the country club bar, and he treats his family as props to maintain this image. And then there is Lydia, my stepmother, the charity board's grand dame. Before she was Lydia Chavez, the respected chair of the annual Riverton Charity Gala. She was Lydia Beaudry, my father's executive assistant, She was the one who booked his flights, screened his calls, and, as it turned out, comforted him during the collapse of his first marriage. She is a woman who saw an opportunity and seized it with both hands. She traded her efficiency for his status, and she has never looked back. Now she wields her position in the community like a weapon, organizing bake sales and silent auctions with the precision of a military campaign. Her charity is not about giving back. It is about reinforcing her own fragile place in the Riverton hierarchy. The symbol of their new marriage, their fresh start, is Caleb. He is Lydia's son from a previous relationship, whom my father adopted as soon as the ink was dry on his divorce papers. Caleb is the crown jewel of their blended family. He has been given everything, the best schools, the newest car, or the promise of one, the assumption that the world would, and should, bend to his every whim. He is the living, breathing proof that their union was a success, a blank slate on which they could project all their ambitions. And then there is me. I am the relic of the old marriage, the one that failed, the daughter of the first wife, the one who is not mentioned. While Caleb was being groomed for success, I was being utilized. I am Hope, the data analyst, the quiet one, the responsible one. I worked 2 jobs in high school to save for a car that ran. I applied for every scholarship in the state of Colorado to get through college without their help. I paid my own tuition. I am still paying my student loans. I work 50, sometimes 60 hours a week at Northbury Analytics, finding patterns in numbers while my own family's finances are a black hole. This dynamic is perfectly captured in the photographs Lydia has arranged on the gleaming white shelves in the living room. It is a gallery of their success, in every frame. Caleb is in the center, Caleb at graduation, arms slung around Mark, Caleb holding a skiing trophy, Lydia kissing his cheek, Caleb at the beach, tan and smiling. I am in some of them. If you look closely, I am at the edge of the frame, half in shadow. My smile small and tight. I am the person holding the camera. I am the person who was told to step out of the light. Lydia has mastered the art of using my sacrifice as a building block for her own reputation. Hope is just so practical, she tells her friends at the charity luncheons, her voice dripping with false modesty. She insisted on paying for school herself. Such independence. She gets that from me. She portrays my quiet desperation to escape as a virtue she instilled. To my father, I am something else. I am not a person. I am a utility. I am the financial balance keeper. I am the one with the good credit score. I am the one with the steady paycheck from a respectable firm. He does not ask me about my work, my life, my dreams. He asks me if I can float him alone until his next big deal closes. He views my income not as my own, but as a shared family resource, a resource that he, as the patriarch, has the right to manage and deploy. This entire performance, this hollow charade, is why my grandfather left. Walt Chavez is my father's father, and he is a man made of different material. He sees Riverton not as an achievement, but as a sickness. He hates the fake lakes, the identical houses, the men who live on lies. He tried, for years, to talk sense into my father, to warn him about the hollow men he was becoming. But Mark was too seduced by the glitter. The last time Walt came to this house was 5 years ago, for Christmas. Lydia had just had the entire ground floor redone in shades of white and gray. She had thrown out the old leather armchair Walt used to sit in, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. He stood in the entryway of this cold white mausoleum, looked at my father, looked at Lydia, and said, "You've built yourself a very expensive tomb. Mark." He turned around, walked out the castle door, and never came back. He did not cut contact with me, though he is the one person who never saw me as a prop or a variable. Every Christmas, without fail, a postcard arrives, not from anywhere fancy, usually from a small town in Arizona or a fishing camp in Montana. The pictures are of deserts or mountains, not country clubs. His handwriting is a strong, clear script. Don't let them mistake your kindness for weakness. He wrote one year, The highest trees catch the most wind, but the deepest roots hold the strongest. He wrote another. He was the only one who saw me. And he was the one who had set the trap. All those years ago, the trust fund. He had built a fortress around me, knowing, even before I did, what I would need to be protected from. Lydia knew nothing of this. Of course, to her, I was just a resource to be tapped, which brought us to this morning, before the party, before the guests arrived, before my grandfather turned off the stove. The Audi was just the latest, most blatant move, but it was not the end goal, I knew, with the cold certainty of a data analyst looking at a trend line, what she was really after. This morning, while I was arranging prosciutto and melon on a platter, Lydia had called me into the home office. My father was already gone, picking up a few last-minute things, which meant he was at the country club, steadying his nerves. "Hope, honey," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I am so glad we have this moment." She gestured to the pristine, white lacquer desk. On it, next to her laptop, was a small, neat stack of papers, a legal document. "Your father and I were talking," she said, "and we are just so proud of you, so responsible. But honey, you work so hard. You have so much stress. We worry about you." She picked up the top paper. "This is just a formality. It is a financial power of attorney. It just means that if, God forbid, something were to happen, or if you just got too overwhelmed with work, I could help you. I could manage your accounts, pay your bills, make sure your investments are working for you. I know how to make money grow. I can take that burden off your shoulders." It was a complete annexation, a total surrender. She was not just asking to co-sign on a car, she was asking for the keys to my entire life. She was asking me to sign my name, my credit, my future, and my trust fund, the one she did not even know the full extent of, over to her. "I just need you to sign here," she said, pointing to the last page. I looked at the document. I looked at her eyes bright with a predatory, expectant greed. "No," I said. Her face did not just fall. It collapsed. The mask of the caring stepmother disintegrated, revealing the raw, grasping ambition beneath. "What did you say?" I said, "No, I am not signing that." Her hand shot out, grabbing my wrist, the same wrist she had grabbed this morning. "You ungrateful little girl, after everything I have done for this family, for you, you will not stand in the way of this. You will not stand in the way of Caleb's future." "This is not about Caleb," I said, my voice shaking, but my spine, the one Walt always wrote about, finally solidifying. "This is about you, and I am not signing it." That was when my father had come home, and the argument had been postponed, pushed down, to be dealt with after the party, after the presentation of the Audi. But now, standing in the kitchen, the flame was off. The smell of cooling meat and raw gas filled the air, and my grandfather, the man who had built the fortress, was here. He was holding a thick manila envelope, and he was here to tear the whole damned house down. The knowledge of what was to come, the information that was my only armor, had not arrived in a flash of light. It had arrived 3 days ago, on a Tuesday, under the sterile fluorescent glare of the Northbury Analytics office. I was at my desk, deep in a dataset projecting consumer spending habits for a new energy drink. When the email popped up, we used an internal messaging system, so my actual email inbox was usually just corporate spam and calendar invites. This one was from an external address. The sender was Roan and Pike, LLP. It meant nothing to me. I almost marked it as spam. But something in the subject line stopped me. Confidential. Walt Chavez Trust. Activation inquiry. My blood went cold. I clicked it. The email was short, formal, and terrifying. It was from a senior partner named Harper Pike. It stated that their firm represented the interests of the trust established by Mr. Walter Chavez, and that recent information had led them to inquire about the potential activation of the duress clause. Duress clause? I had a vague memory of my grandfather, years ago, telling me he was putting something away for me, something the vultures couldn't touch. I was 16 at the time. I thought he meant a savings bond. The email continued. A one-time security key is required to access the preliminary documents. This key was sent via separate physical mail to your designated safe address. My safe address was a post office box I had rented under my own name when I went to college. I still kept it, paying the $30 a year fee, mostly for my credit card statements and bank info, to keep them out of Lydia's line of sight. But I had not checked it in a week. My mind raced. Then I remembered Walt's postcards. He always sent them. He had sent one last week, and it was still in my work bag. I had glanced at it, a picture of a saguaro cactus against a bleached-out Arizona sky, and tossed it in my bag to read later. I fumbled for my bag, my hands shaking. I pulled out the postcard. On the back, in his familiar, strong handwriting, it read, "Hope, the desert looks empty, but it knows how to wait. Remember this. 303 Delta Niner Echo." It was not a phone number. It was a code. I went back to the email. I clicked the secure link. I entered the code. A new window opened. It was a secure portal, and there were documents, dozens of them. The first one was a letter addressed to me, from Harper Pike. "Dear Ms. Chavez," it began. "If you are reading this, the duress clause of your trust has been flagged for review. This clause was specifically designed by your grandfather to protect you from financial coercion or abuse. The trust is substantial, and you are the sole beneficiary. Financial coercion is defined by the trust as, but not limited to, attempts to seize control of your assets, leveraging your finances for the benefit of others without your consent, threats made to induce financial compliance, or the attempt to gain power of attorney over your estate under false pretenses." I felt the air leave my lungs. False pretenses, power of attorney. I had to get these documents off my screen. I was in an open-plan office. Anyone could walk by. I clicked print on the 5 most important-looking files, including the summary, and sent them to the main printer bay at the far end of the floor. I grabbed a file folder as a prop and walked, forcing my legs to move at a normal pace. The walk across the office felt like crossing a desert. The printer whirred, spitting out the pages. I grabbed them, still warm, folded them, and shoved them into the folder without looking at them. I went back to my desk, saved the PDFs from the portal onto a blank USB drive, and then deleted the email, the browser history, and the cached files from my computer. I stood up and walked to the small kitchenette. We all kept personal items there. I had an old, decorative tin of Earl Grey tea bags on my shelf. I slipped the USB drive to the very bottom, beneath the foil-wrapped bags. I looked at the clock, 10:30 a.m. I took my phone and my bag and walked out to the stairwell. I went down 12 flights of stairs and out into the parking garage. I got in my car, locked the doors, and dialed the number for Harper Pike. A calm, professional voice answered. "Harper Pike speaking?" "My name is Hope Chavez," I said, my voice trembling. I just got your email. I read the letter." "Ms. Chavez, thank you for calling." Harper's voice was even, reassuring. "I can confirm that we are the administrators of your grandfather's trust. The inquiry was triggered by a notification set by Mr. Chavez himself. He has, let's say, a very intuitive system for monitoring your well-being. He informed us that he believed you were entering a period of high pressure from your father and stepmother, specifically regarding a large, non-essential purchase. The Audi. My God, Walt knew about the Audi." That's correct," I whispered. "The terms are simple. Hope," Harper said, her tone shifting slightly, becoming less lawyerly and more like an ally. "This trust is your fortress, but it has a drawbridge. If you are ever in a position where you feel forced, threatened, or manipulated, financially or otherwise, you have full and total power. Your grandfather made it clear. This money is for your safety, your education, or for you to start a new life. It is not, and I quote, to be squandered on the vanities of fools." "What do I do?" I asked. "You live your life, but you document. If they attempt to coerce you, you document it, If they threaten you, you document it. Send it to me. We are your shield. Any proof of coercion immediately and automatically activates the full protective measures of the trust. It moves the assets into an immediate lockdown status that no one but you can access. It also authorizes us to take legal action on your behalf to protect you. You are not alone in this. I hung up the phone and sat in my car for 10 minutes, just breathing, a fortress. When I went home that night, the world had tilted. The house felt different. It was no longer my prison. It was the scene of the conflict, and I finally had ammunition. Lydia found me in the kitchen, right before I could escape to my room. "Hope, honey," she said, her voice like warm honey, the same voice she used on her charity committees. "You have just been working so hard. I worry about you. All that stress." I just stared at her. "I'm fine, Lydia." "Oh, I know you are. You are so strong. But you have all that money just sitting in a savings account. It is doing nothing for you. You know, your father and I, we have an investment portfolio that has performed at over 12% for 3 years running. You should let me help you. Let me take that burden off your shoulders. I can make that little nest egg of yours grow." I saw her then for what she was, not a stepmother, a predator. She did not even know about the trust. She was just sniffing around my paycheck, my small savings. She was practicing. "No, thank you, Lydia," I said. "I'm comfortable managing it myself." Her smile tightened. "Do not be silly. You do not know about these things. It is complicated. I am just trying to help you. We are a family, after all." The very next day, I took my lunch break and drove 2 towns over, to Morganville. I walked into the Pioneer Credit Union, a small local bank where no one knew the Chavez name, and I opened a new checking and savings account. I used my P.O. box as the address. I went back to my office and rerouted my Northbury Analytics paycheck. The next direct deposit would go to Pioneer. I left exactly $300 in my Riverton bank account. I was cutting the lines. The power of attorney incident happened 2 days later. The pressure about the Audi had been building. Caleb was already telling his friends about it, and then Lydia had called me into the office with the papers. "Just a formality," she'd said. When I refused, her face had changed. The mask of the caring stepmother had not just slipped. She had ripped it off and thrown it into the fire. She did not yell, not then. The yelling came later, via text. That night, my phone lit up. "Lydia, you will not ruin this for Caleb. That car is the least you can do." "Lydia, your father is under an enormous amount of stress. Your selfishness is making it worse." "Lydia, I am warning you. Hope, you are part of this family, and you will contribute. You will not embarrass us." And then, the kill shot. "Lydia, I found the power of attorney papers in your trash. You think you are smarter than me? You will sign them, or I will make your life so miserable you will wish you had. We will see who controls the money in this house." She had found the unsigned papers I had thrown out at home. She thought I was hiding my refusal. She did not know I was building a case. I was a data analyst. I documented everything. I took screenshots of every single message. I saved them in order. I timestamped them. I PDF'd the entire exchange. I uploaded it to the secure portal. My email to Harper Pike was one sentence. "Is this the coercion you were talking about?" Her reply came back in less than 5 minutes. "Yes, this is the trigger. The duress clause is hereby activated. The assets are secure as of 10:47 p.m. We are ready. Do not engage. Your grandfather has been notified. He is handling the response." Handling the response? The party invitation was sent out the next morning. "Let's celebrate Caleb," Lydia had trilled at breakfast, as if the night before had never happened. The data points all clicked into place. The party was not a celebration. It was an execution. It was Lydia's public stage to force my hand. She would corner me in front of all their friends, demand the keys, and force me to play the role of the generous, supportive daughter. My refusal would make me the villain. My compliance would give her the victory. I looked at the invitation, at the cursive, embossed script. I looked at Lydia, already on the phone with the caterer, laughing. And I understood. She thought this was her stage, but she had not seen the director. She had no idea who was in the wings. This was not her party. It was my grandfather's, and he was not handling the response from Arizona. He was coming. This was the public reveal. He was coming to shut the whole show down. So when he walked through that door, and the entire room fell silent, I was the only one who was not surprised. I was the only one who knew that the man with the manila envelope was not a guest. He was the cavalry. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The only sound was the electric hum of the refrigerator and the faint, panicked breathing of my father. The flame was off. The sizzle of the steak had died, leaving a smell of cooling grease and raw gas. My grandfather, Walt, stood by the stove, his hand still near the knob. He looked like a man carved from mountain rock, immovable and ancient. The neighbors were frozen. Mrs. Dalton, who moments before had been praising our unity, was holding a champagne flute halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide. Her husband stood beside her, his jovial expression gone, replaced by a tense confusion. Lydia recovered first. It was her stage, and a stagecrasher had just taken the spotlight. A laugh, sharp and brittle as breaking glass, burst from her throat. "Walt, goodness, you startled us. You've always had a flair for the dramatic, haven't you?" She glided toward him, a hostess managing a difficult guest. "You are just in time. We are celebrating Caleb, but you've turned off the stove. Mark, darling," she said, not looking at him, her eyes locked on Walt. "The steaks will be ruined. Do not let your father's entrance spoil the evening." My father, Mark, looked from Walt to Lydia, a man caught between a rock slide and a snake pit. He was sweating, his face pale. "Dad," he stammered. We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," Walt said. His voice was quiet, but it dominated the room. "Mark, the stove," Lydia commanded, her voice no longer light, but a sharp, serrated edge. Obedience, ingrained and desperate, won. My father lunged forward, his hand, shaking, fumbled for the knob. There was a click, then the whoosh of the igniter. The blue flame flared back to life. Obedient and false, the sizzle resumed. Lydia's composure returned instantly. She had restarted the performance. She turned from Walt, dismissing him, and clapped her hands together. The sound was a sharp, false punctuation in the tense air. "Now," she trilled, her smile broader than ever, painted on. "Where were we? Yes, the presentation." She turned to the neighbors, her arms spread wide. "This is the moment we have all been waiting for. A little something to celebrate our wonderful Caleb." She looked pointedly at Mrs. Dalton. "You will want to get your phones out for this. It is a moment of pure family joy." A few neighbors, relieved to have a script to follow, fumbled for their phones. The small red lights of recording icons began to glow, turning the kitchen into a strange, multi-angle film set. "Caleb, honey," Lydia cooed. "Stand right here." She positioned him in the center of the kitchen, under the brightest track light. Caleb, who had looked confused and angry by Walt's arrival, now visibly brightened. His arrogance returned, settling on him like a well-cut jacket. He ran a hand through his hair, striking a casual pose, ready to receive his tribute. He looked straight at the phones. Lydia's script was now in its final act. She turned to me, her eyes, cold and triumphant, met mine. "Hope, darling, it is your turn." She expected me to walk to the coat closet. She expected me to retrieve the velvet box containing the key fob. She expected me to hand it to Caleb, to smile, to be the dutiful, supportive, silent sister. I did not move. "Hope," she hissed, the smile not wavering for the cameras, but the voice dropping 100 degrees. "Now." I took a step forward, but I did not go to the coat closet. I walked toward the center of the room, toward Caleb. I was empty-handed. My palms were sweating, but my hands were open, holding nothing. Wait, not quite nothing. I had been holding a napkin. But I had slipped the sealed, business-sized envelope from my pocket into my hand, the one from Ronan Pike LLP, the one Harper Pike had overnighted to my post office box, containing a single-page declaration of the duress clause activation. Lydia's eyes darted to my hands. She saw no velvet box. She saw no keys. Her smile faltered, just for a millisecond. "Hope," Caleb said, his voice impatient, holding out his hand, palm up. "Come on, I have not got all night." I stopped in front of him. The neighbors were filming. My father was watching, his face a mask of terror. Lydia was a statue of barely contained rage. I looked at Caleb's outstretched hand. Then I looked at his face. "There is no car." "Caleb," I said. My voice was clear. It did not shake. The silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of shock from Walt's arrival. It was the silence of a story that had suddenly, violently, gone off script. Caleb's grin did not just fade, it shattered. "What? What did you say?" "I said, there is no car," I repeated, louder this time, "for the phones, for the neighbors, for everyone. And there is no more silence." The blood drained from Caleb's face. Mrs. Dalton's hand, holding her phone, wavered. "Hope!" My father's voice was a desperate bark. "Stop this! What are you doing? You are destroying this family's honor." I turned to him. The flame he had relit was still burning, uselessly, on the stove. "Honor?" I said, the word tasting like ash. "Honor is not something you buy with a car, Dad, and it is certainly not something you pay for with my grandfather's trust fund." The word trust fund hung in the air, electric and dangerous. Lydia's face went white. She knew. I did not know how, but she knew. She knew about the money. She moved so fast I did not even see it. One second she was by the counter. The next she was beside me. Her hand, the one with the blood-red nails, shot out and clamped down on my left wrist, the same wrist she had bruised this morning. I gasped as her fingers dug into the exact same spot, a bright, agonizing starburst of pain. But she was smiling. She leaned in, her other hand coming up to pat my shoulder, a gesture of false comfort for the neighbors. "She is just so emotional," Lydia said to the room, her voice shaking with forced sympathy. "She gets overwhelmed. She works so hard, and she just breaks down. Poor girl." "Let go of me, Lydia," I said, my voice low. "This is not," my father said, trying to take control, his voice booming with a false authority, "the time or the place." "The hell it is not!" Caleb finally found his voice. It was not the voice of the charming golden boy. It was a raw, ugly snarl. "What is wrong with you? You think you are better than us? You owe us. After everything we have given you, you owe this family." He took a step toward me, his face red and contorted. Lydia's grip on my wrist was crushing. My father was posturing. Caleb was advancing. The neighbors were filming, and the gas flame was still burning, a lie that refused to die. And then, for the second and final time, Walt moved. He stepped past me, past Caleb, past Lydia's performance. He did not walk to the stove. He was already there. He did not look at the neighbors. He looked at my father. He looked at the flame. He did not just turn the knob. He tapped the stove top first, a single sharp gong with his knuckle on the stainless steel. Tap. The room froze again. Then he turned the knob. Click. The blue flame sputtered. It vanished. A small, thin wisp of blue-tinged smoke rose from the burner and disappeared, taking the last of the lies with it. Walt turned to the crowd, his face grim. He raised his voice, clear and cold. "I apologize, ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the neighbors, who were now staring, mouths open, phones still recording. "You were invited here for a celebration, but it seems you've been brought here as unwilling witnesses to an extortion." He raised the thick manila envelope he had been holding. "My daughter-in-law is correct," he said, his eyes finding Lydia's. Her hand was still locked on my wrist. "It is time for gifts. He tore the flap of the envelope, the sound ripping through the silence. "I have a gift, too," he said, pulling out a thick sheaf of papers. "But my gifts are not for liars." He held up the first page. "The truth," he said, "is about to be read into the record." Lydia's hand was still a vice on my wrist. Her nails, those blood-red talons, were not just gripping, they were digging, puncturing the skin. I could feel the sharp, stinging pressure, a prelude to bleeding. Her face, a mask of brittle rage, was inches from mine. The neighbors, a gallery of frozen faces and glowing phone screens, were silent. My father was a statue of cowardice, his eyes darting between his wife, his father, and the dead stove, looking for a script, a cue, any line that would save him. Walt did not look at them. He looked at the papers in his hand. He had the full, undivided attention of everyone in that room. He was not a showman. He was not grandstanding. He was a man presenting a final, unappealable audit. "This," he said, and his voice, though quiet, was so resonant it seemed to come from the stone countertops themselves, "is a copy of the Hawthorne-Chavez Trust, filed in the state of Colorado, ratified and sealed 9 years ago, upon the death of my wife, Elena." He held up the top page. It was thick, creamy paper, bound with a simple blue legal ribbon. "I will not bore your guests," he said, with a dry, almost imperceptible glance at Mrs. Dalton. "With the intricacies of its tax shelters, I will, instead, skip to Article 3, Section 4, Beneficiaries." Lydia's fingers tightened on my wrist. I winced, a small sound that was lost in the absolute stillness. "It states," Walt continued, his finger tracing a line of text, "all primary assets, properties, and liquid funds held within this trust are to be managed by the executor until the primary beneficiary reaches the age of 25, or until the activation of the duress clause, whichever should occur first. At such time, full and total control shall be transferred to—" He paused. He looked up, his eyes finding mine across the small battlefield of the kitchen. "My granddaughter, Hope Elena Chavez, solely and irrevocably." A gasp. It was Mrs. Dalton. Her phone was still pointed at us, though her hand was shaking. "Solely?" Lydia's voice was a venomous whisper. She had not let go of my arm. She could not. It was the only thing holding her up. That is impossible. Mark, he is lying. Tell them he is lying." My father opened his mouth. A dry, croaking sound emerged. "Dad, that is not. We had an understanding." "You had an assumption," Walt corrected him, his voice like ice. "You assumed your inheritance. You assumed your position. You assumed this house, which is leveraged to its chimney in my name, was yours." He turned a page. "Which brings me to Article 4, the duress clause." He did not need to read it. He knew it by heart. "This clause," he said, "was written specifically for this occasion. It defines duress as any attempt by a non-beneficiary to coerce, threaten, manipulate, or leverage the primary beneficiary for financial gain. This includes, but is not limited to, emotional blackmail, threats to family honor, or attempts to gain power of attorney by fraud." He looked at Lydia. Her face, which had been white with rage, was now draining of all color, leaving a sallow gray canvas beneath her makeup. She knew about the papers I had thrown away. "The penalty for the activation of this clause," Walt said, his voice dropping, "is also specific. Any party found to be engaging in such coercion, whether by action or by complicit silence, immediately forfeits any and all secondary claims, residual benefits, or minor stipends associated with the greater Chavez estate. In short, you are cut off. You lose your allowance." The silence was so heavy it felt like a physical weight. My father was no longer just sweating. A visible drop of perspiration broke from his hairline, ran down his temple, and hung, trembling, from his jawline, before dropping onto the shoulder of his expensive linen apron. "This is paper," Lydia finally spat. Her grip on me was the only thing that felt real. Just paper, old threats from a bitter old man. It means nothing. It's lies. You have no proof. Proof, Walt said, as if tasting the word. Yes, proof is required. He folded the papers and laid them on the counter, next to the uncooked steak. He then reached into the inner pocket of his tweed coat. He did not pull out another envelope. He pulled out a small, silver USB drive. It was so small, so modern. It looked almost alien in his weathered hand. Paper is one thing, Walt said. Data is another. He looked toward the coat closet near the entryway, a corner of the room I had not been paying attention to. Ms. Pike, if you would. A woman stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. I had not even seen her. She must have come in with Walt. A silent shadow. She was not a neighbor. She was in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, and she was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit that made Lydia's silk blouse look like a cheap costume. She carried a slim silver laptop. This was not a guest. This was a professional. This was Harper Pike, the name from the emails, the voice on the phone. She walked to the quartz island, right into the center of the kitchen, and opened the laptop. She did not look at any of us. She plugged the USB drive Walt held out to her into the side of the machine. Her movements were economical, precise, and utterly terrifying. "You are," Lydia whispered, her voice trembling. "Not welcome here. This is a private party. Get out." Harper Pike looked at her, a brief, dismissive glance. "I am legal counsel for the estate," she said, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the humidity of the room. "I am exactly where I need to be." She typed a password. The screen glowed. "My son, Mark," Walt explained to the horrified room, "is a creature of habit. He makes his difficult calls from his home office, where he believes he is alone. He also, however, has a voice-activated speaker on his desk, a gift from Caleb 2 Christmases ago, a speaker that, when linked to a cloud account, keeps a very helpful archive of its recordings. My son, it seems, never learned how to clear his cache." Mark's face crumpled. It was the face of a man who had just seen the gallows being built. No, I... "Be quiet, Mark," Walt said. It was not a request. Harper Pike's finger hovered over the trackpad. "This," she said, "is a voice recording captured at 9:14 p.m. 2 nights ago, from a device registered to this address. The file is labeled Conversation Mark, Lydia, Hope." She had found the call where I had refused to sign the power of attorney. "This is illegal!" Lydia shrieked, finally releasing my wrist, shoving me away so she could lunge toward the laptop. "It is perfectly legal," Harper Pike said, not flinching, holding up a hand to stop Lydia's advance. "In Colorado, a one-party consent state, a recording made by a participant in the conversation, or in this case, a recording archived by the primary user of the device who was also a participant, is admissible, and Ms. Chavez," she nodded at me, "is a participant." Lydia froze. "Play it," Walt said. Harper clicked the button, and my father's voice, not the jovial, backslapping party host, but his real voice, filled the kitchen. It was cold, flat, and dead. "Hope, you have to be realistic. This thing with the Audi is a non-issue. You will sign the papers." My recorded voice, small, shaking. "Dad, I can't. It's not right." Mark's voice, impatient. "I don't care about your feelings. This is about family survival. This is about Caleb's future. Do you understand what I'm saying? You are a part of this family, and you will do your part. I am not asking you. I am telling you, you will sign." And then, the second voice, Lydia, syrupy, cloying, like poison poured over sugar. "He's right, honey. Just sign. Don't make this harder on us. We know what's best. We are trying to help you. Why be so difficult? It is just a signature. It is just for emergencies. It is just so we can protect you." My recorded voice, Protect me, or protect Caleb. A sharp sigh. Lydia's recorded voice. You are being selfish. After everything we have done, you will sign those papers. Hope, or you will find out just how difficult things can get. The click of the recording ending echoed in the tomb-like silence of the kitchen. No one moved. The neighbors were statues. Mrs. Dalton's face was ashen. Her phone was no longer pointed at us. It was recording, secretly, from her hip, as if she were afraid to be caught witnessing this. Mr. Dalton's face was dark with a kind of embarrassed anger. Walt turned, his gaze falling on me. His eyes were not angry, not triumphant. They were just steady. They were the first steady thing I had felt in my entire life. From now on, hope, he said, his voice quiet but caring to every corner. You do not need to ask anyone's permission to live a decent life. You are free. That was what broke Caleb. The entitlement, the arrogance, the lifetime of being told he was the center of the universe, it all shattered in the face of this new, terrible reality. It is a conspiracy, he roared, his face a blotchy, furious red. It is a setup. She trapped them. She trapped me. She did this. That snake. He did not lunge at Walt. He did not lunge at Harper. He lunged at me. He never made it. Mr. Dalton, who had been standing beside him, a man who had watched Caleb grow up, shot out a heavy arm and caught him across the chest. Son, just calm down. Now is not the time, boy. Caleb struggled against his grip, his face ugly with rage. Let go of me! She's trying to ruin me! She did not say a word. Mr. Dalton said, his voice a low rumble, and he did not let go. And then Lydia screamed. It was not a word. It was a raw, primal sound of loss, a shriek of an animal that has seen its prey stolen from its jaws. You! Her finger, shaking, pointed at me. It was you, all of it, just because you are jealous. You have always been jealous of him. You want to steal from your brother. You want to take what is his. I looked at her. The blood from her fingernails was welling up on my wrist, a bright red pattern against my pale skin. I felt nothing. The fear was gone. The obligation was gone. It was all just data. I took a step forward, away from the shelter of my grandfather. I looked at the woman who had tormented me for a decade. No one is stealing anything. Lydia, I said. My voice was calm. It was the calmest thing in the room. Caleb has his own money. You have your own. This is not about stealing. Walt, I nodded to my grandfather, is just restoring fairness. I looked at the chaos. This is a data correction. I turned to my father. He was holding his hands up, a gesture of placation. He was actually trying to smile. It was the most grotesque thing I had ever seen. It was the smile he used when a business deal was collapsing. A tight, desperate, control the situation grimace that did not touch his terrified, dead eyes. Now, he said, his voice a wet, pleading sound. Let's all calm down. This is just a family matter. A misunderstanding. Dad, you have made your point. You have had your theater. He tried to laugh. The sound died in his throat. We can talk about this. Lydia, Hope, let's talk about this. The bead of sweat on his jaw finally fell, splashing onto the cold, dead stovetop. Walt just watched him. He watched this pathetic, final, desperate dance of denial. He let the silence stretch, filling the room until it was suffocating. Then, he looked down at the stove. He looked at the burner he had extinguished, at the ruined steak, at the congealing grease. He spoke, his voice slow, measured, and final. Each word was a nail in the coffin of my old life. Sometimes, Walt Chavez said, you have to turn off the stove. He looked up, his eyes sweeping over Mark, over Lydia, over Caleb, over the entire horrified room. Because the thing that is burning, he said, is not the food. And in that second, I heard it. It was not a sound. It was a feeling. It was the sound of the entire crystal, glass, and stainless steel facade of the House of Chavez, of Riverton, of my entire life, shattering into a million pieces and falling at my feet. The party was over. The party was over. The word implies a gentle conclusion, a winding down. This was not that. This was an amputation. The neighbors were still there, a stunned, silent chorus. Their phones now lowered but not off. They were no longer guests. They were witnesses, trapped in the wreckage of a social event that had become a crime scene. Lydia was a statue of pure, undiluted hatred, her chest heaving. My father seemed to have shrunk. He was staring at the dead stove, his face gray, his entire world of illusion collapsing into that cold, dark burner. Caleb was still being held back by Mr. Dalton, his face a mask of furious, impotent disbelief. Harper Pike, her laptop still open on the quartz island as if it were a judge's bench, did not wait for the silence to be filled. She was the one who had brought the documents, and she was the one who would make them speak. "Thank you all for your time," she said, her voice crisp and clear, addressing the neighbors as if dismissing a board meeting. "Your presence here has been illuminating." She looked at her watch. "Walt, the officers should be here momentarily." "Officers?" My father's head snapped up, a spark of panic reigniting his dead eyes. "You called the police? On your own family?" "Dad, you can't." "I did not," Walt said, his voice flat. "Ms. Pike did. This is not family. This is a business intervention." Harper had already retrieved a set of folded documents from her briefcase, the one she had left so discreetly by the door. Based on the communications from Ms. Lydia Chavez last night, which constituted a direct and credible threat of financial coercion and extortion, I filed a petition for an emergency protection order on behalf of my client, Ms. Hope Chavez, this morning at the Riverton Courthouse. She placed the papers on the counter next to Walt's manila envelope. The judge signed it at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I was instructed to serve it in person, in an environment where the threat was likely to reoccur. This, she gestured to the room, the food, the silent neighbors. Was that environment? The Riverton police were notified of the service, and as this is now a civil matter with a high probability of escalation, they are sending a unit to keep the peace and take reports. As if summoned by her words, the blue and red lights began their silent, strobing dance, washing through the kitchen's bay windows, painting the white cabinets and the pale faces in rhythmic flashes of emergency. Lydia let out a small, strangled sound. 2 uniformed officers, a man and a woman, walked through the open front door. They were not aggressive, not here for a confrontation. They were here for the paperwork. "Evening," the male officer said, his eyes taking in the scene, the half-dozen stunned neighbors, the feast on the island, my father in his apron, Lydia, trembling with rage, me, standing by my grandfather. "We're here about a civil standby and a protection order." Harper Pike stepped forward, all business. "Officer, I am Harper Pike, counsel for the estate. This is the signed order for Ms. Hope Chavez, to be served on Mr. Mark Chavez and Ms. Lydia Chavez." She handed him the papers. The officer read them, his expression neutral. "Officer," Harper continued, "my client would also like to file a report. The subjects of this order have, in the last hour, violated its terms by committing further acts of coercion. We also have a witness to a physical assault that occurred this morning." "Assault?" the female officer asked, her attention sharpening. She looked at me. "Ma'am?" "She's lying," Lydia shrieked. "She's unstable. She's making it all up. She's mentally ill. We've been trying to get her help. And this is a breakdown." Harper Pike held up her hand, a gesture of absolute calm authority. "Officer, my client's employer, Northbury Analytics, has already provided a sworn affidavit confirming her employment in good standing, her perfect attendance record, and her role as a senior data analyst. The mental instability claim is a common, and frankly, lazy, tactic used by financial abusers. She turned to the laptop and clicked a file. We also have the recording, which you've already heard. And this? She turned the laptop screen toward the officers. It was not a recording, it was a spreadsheet, a flowchart. This is a private account I uncovered during my preliminary asset review. It is called the Caleb Fund. It has been receiving regular monthly transfers from a consulting account of Mark's, but the interesting part is the source of Mark's funds, which appear to be co-signed and collateralized against Ms. Hope Chavez's Education Trust. He has been systematically and illegally siphoning money from his daughter to fund his stepson. Lydia made a small, choking noise. The Wire Fraud Division will be very interested in that, the female officer said dryly. She looked at me, her gaze softening just a fraction. Ma'am, you said there was an assault? I just held up my left wrist. It was raw, bleeding slightly from where Lydia's nails had broken the skin. Underneath, the mottled purple and red of the morning's bruise was a dark, damning shadow. Who did that to you? Before I could answer, Mr. Dalton spoke, his voice a low rumble from the back of the room. I saw her do it, the stepmother, Lydia. All eyes turned to him. He looked embarrassed but resolute. This morning, out on the driveway, I was getting my paper. She grabbed her, hard, by the same wrist, yelling about a car. I thought it was just a family spat. But seeing this, and seeing that mark, that was from this morning. The officer nodded, taking out a notepad. And I'm assuming that's what she did just now, as well? I nodded. Yes, she grabbed the same spot. The male officer turned to Mark and Lydia. He was no longer a peacekeeper. He was an officer of the law. Mr. and Ms. Chavez, you have been served with a temporary emergency protection order. You are required to maintain a distance of no less than 500 feet from Ms. Hope Chavez. You are not to contact her, her place of work, or her legal counsel, except through your own attorney. Do you understand? This is my house, Mark blustered, his last shred of authority. Actually, Harper Pike interjected. The house is a primary asset of the trust, which Ms. Chavez now controls. Technically, you are trespassing, but the order is clear, 500 feet. The officer looked at my father. You need to leave, now, both of you. Leave? Lydia's voice cracked. Where are we supposed to go? That is not my concern, ma'am, the officer said. You can take your personal effects, a change of clothes, toiletries. Your son can drive you. My internship, Caleb stammered, finally speaking, his face pale. The reality was crashing in. The party. The party is over, son, Walt said, his first words to him. And it was. The neighbors, sensing an official dismissal, began to file out, their faces a mixture of horror, pity, and a strange, dark excitement. They were leaving a party that they would talk about for the rest of their lives. Mr. Dalton gave the officer his statement. Mrs. Dalton, I noticed, was texting furiously. The news of the social media incident was already spreading. The videos, the audio, the police lights. Caleb's prestigious internship would be gone by morning, evaporated by the scandal. Harper Pike was talking to the officers, exchanging information, and Walt just stood by my side. He signed a document, a witness statement, confirming his knowledge of the long-term pattern of financial pressure. He signed it on the quartz island, using his own pen, his signature a bold, angry slash. Then he placed a hand on my back. It is time to go. Hope. We walked out. We left the house with the dead stove, the cooling steaks, the smashed illusions. We left Lydia grabbing clothes, her face a mask of silent, murderous rage. We left my father on the phone, his voice cracking, trying to find a lawyer, a friend, anyone. We left Caleb standing alone in the middle of the kitchen, the golden boy, tarnished and broken. I did not look back. Walt drove an older, clean sedan I did not recognize, a rental. We drove in silence, Away from the fake lakes and the manicured lawns of Riverton, we drove for 20 minutes, to a part of the city I did not know, full of older brick buildings and real trees. He pulled into the garage of a nondescript apartment complex. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. He unlocked the door to a small, temporary apartment. It was not luxurious. It was not stylish. It was furnished with clean, basic, anonymous furniture. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. "This is Linden 3B, he said, dropping the keys on a small table by the door. "It is safe. It is leased in my name. No one knows it exists." He went to the small kitchen, filled a kettle with water, and plugged it in. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not tell me to be strong. He just made us tea. He sat across from me at the small table. He pushed a mug of black tea toward me. "You did good, kid," he said. I just nodded, my hands wrapped around the warmth of the mug. "This," he said, "is where the real work begins, the paperwork." Harper Pike arrived an hour later. She had her briefcase. She looked tired, but satisfied. "They are gone," she said. "The house is secure. I've initiated a temporary freeze on all joint accounts and credit lines. They can't access a single dollar of your money, or, more accurately, the trust's money. The blood supply is cut off." She pulled one last file from her briefcase. It was thin, just a few pages. "This is the last thing, hope," she said. "The rest is just noise. This is the signal." She laid it in front of me. "This is your legal independence. It is a petition to the court, using the trust documents and the police report, to formally emancipate you from any and all remaining financial or medical authority your parents might claim. It severs the final link. It makes you, in the eyes of the law, entirely your own." I looked at Walt. He nodded. "Once." "Freedom," my grandfather said, his voice quiet, "does not come from magic. Hope, it comes from the right signature at the right time." I picked up the pen. The kettle was whistling again in the kitchen. I looked at the line at the bottom of the page. It was waiting for me. For Hope Chavez. Not a variable, not a prop, not a financial mule. I signed my name, and for the first time, it felt like my own. Apartment 3B at the Linden. It was not in Riverton. It was, in every conceivable way, the antithesis of the place I had just left. There was no gleaming quartz, no stainless steel facade, no cavernous, echoing silence. The building itself was old, built of honest, solid, unglamorous red brick. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and old wood. When Walt turned the key in the lock, it made a satisfying mechanical thunk, a sound of finality, a sound of security. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, a living area, a kitchen barely large and enough for 2 people. The walls were a faded, institutional beige, and there were scuff marks near the floor from the previous tenant's furniture. There was a radiator under the window that hissed gently. It was the safest place I had ever been in my life. I stood in the center of the small living room, my one suitcase, packed with the few things I truly owned, work clothes, my laptop, my certification plaques, at my feet. Walt, who had followed me in, went straight to the small, clean kitchen. It had a simple electric stove, not a $6,000 gas range. He did not turn it on. He filled the kettle with water from the tap and set it on the counter, plugging it into the wall. He looked at me, standing there, still vibrating from the night's events, still feeling the ghost of Lydia's nails in my wrist. He gestured to the small stove, then to the electric kettle. "This," he said, his voice quiet, "is the first house where you get to turn on the stove yourself. Hope, you decide what gets cooked. You decide when the flame is lit, and you are the only one who gets to turn it off." The next day, he was gone, back to his own quiet life in Arizona, leaving me with the keys and a prepaid lease for 6 months. "Call Harper for the big things," he'd said. "Call me for the real things." My first act of independence was not a grand gesture. It was a trip to the hardware store. I bought 3 cans of paint, not a cold, sterile white, a warm, soft, unassuming cream. I bought a roller, a tray, and a roll of blue tape. For 3 days, I painted. The work was mechanical, physical, grounding. I felt the pull in my shoulders, the satisfying ache in my back. I was not analyzing data. I was building a wall, my wall. With every stroke, I was covering the beige. I was covering the memory of the Riverton house. The smell of the low VOC paint was the smell of a fresh start, not the cloying, suffocating scent of gardenias. When I was finished, the apartment glowed. It was not bright. It was warm. I went to a local nursery and bought one plant. It was a small, fiercely spiky cactus in a plain terracotta pot. I placed it on the windowsill, where it would get the most light. It was stubborn, self-sufficient, and it had its own defenses. I named it Resilient. On Monday, I logged into my work email from my new, secure apartment. My boss had already sent a brief, professional note. "Hope, heard you are dealing with a difficult family matter. Take the time you need," I replied. "Thank you. I will be working remotely for a few days, but will be back in the office by next week." There was another email. It was from Harper Pike. The subject line was simple. Confirmation. The body was even simpler. Ms. Chavez, as of 9:05 this morning, the Walt Chavez Trust is fully activated and under your sole control. All assets have been transferred and secured. The fortress is yours. Please let me know when you would like to schedule a full financial review. Congratulations on your independence. I read the words sole control 5 times. The fortress was mine. I opened a new tab in my browser. I went to the website for the University of Colorado, Denver. I looked up the graduate program for the business school. I downloaded the application for the Master of Science in Data Analytics program. My grandfather's trust had one condition. The money was for safety, education, or a new life. I was about to check all 3 boxes. That night, I realized I had not eaten a real meal in 2 days. I had been living on the tea Walt had made me and the sheer, vibrating adrenaline of freedom. The small kitchen, now painted a warm cream, was clean and empty. I had bought groceries, simple things, eggs, bread, a block of cheese. I stood in front of the electric stove, the one Walt had gestured to. I was going to make an omelet. I took out a small pan. I put it on the burner, and I reached for the knob. My hand was shaking. It was absurd. I was a data analyst. I commanded complex models. I had faced down my entire family. I was not afraid of an electric coil. But I was trembling, not with fear, with the sheer, unadulterated weight of the action. This was the first stove, the first flame I was lighting for myself. It was not a performance. It was not a prop for a party. It was just, for me, to feed myself. I turned the knob. The coil glowed a dull red, then a bright, steady orange. It was quiet. It was efficient. It was real. I cracked an egg into the pan. The sizzle was small, private, and entirely my own. I had forgotten the kettle. I had filled it for tea, and it chose that exact moment to reach a boiling point. The whistle started, low, then rose to a high, piercing, insistent shriek. And I laughed. It was a strange, rusty sound, a sound I had not heard from myself in years. It was not a polite, Riverton titter. It was a real, sudden, breathless laugh. The kettle was screaming. The pan was sizzling. My hand was still shaking, and it was the most wonderful, chaotic, beautiful moment of my life. The next day, I bought a legal pad, the yellow kind, and a good, black felt-tipped pen. I sat on my new, comfortable second-hand couch, and I started a new data set. The list was titled, Things I Will Never Compromise on Again. I wrote, 1. My name will never appear on a loan document that is not my own. 2. Family honor is not a currency I accept or trade in. 3. I will not be silent to keep someone else comfortable. 4. I will not set myself on fire to keep others warm. The list went on for 3 pages. The old world tried to break in. Of course, it came not as a roar, but as a pathetic whisper. A week after I had moved, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived. It had been forwarded from my post office box. The return address was a name I did not recognize. Lydia's friend from the charity board. Inside, the stationery was thick, embossed with Lydia's initials. Her handwriting was a looping, controlled, angry script. It was not an apology. It was a demand. She did not ask how I was. She did not express remorse. She wrote about the devastation I had caused. She wrote about family honor and public humiliation. She wrote about Caleb, whose entire future I had maliciously destroyed. She ended with a plea that was really a command. You must fix this. You must tell everyone you were confused, that you were ill, for the sake of this family. You must retract your horrible lies. I read it. Standing by my kitchen counter, I felt the familiar, cold dread begin to seep into my stomach, the old, conditioned response. Fix it. Make peace. Be quiet. Then I looked at the list on my refrigerator. I will not be silent to keep someone else comfortable. I did not rip the letter up. I did not burn it. That would be giving it too much power. I folded it neatly, put it back in its expensive envelope, and I walked it over to the recycling bin under my sink. It was just paper. It was just irrelevant data from a corrupted source. I did not reply. On Monday, I went back to the Northbury Analytics office. People were kind, but distant. They had clearly heard the rumors. The Riverton gossip mill was efficient. My boss, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah, called me into her office at 10 a.m. "Close the door," she said. I sat down, my heart pounding. "I am not going to ask you about your family," she said, leaning forward. "Frankly, it is none of my business, and I find personal gossip unprofessional. What I am going to ask you is about the K-level projections. You are the only one who can make sense of that data." She slid a file across the desk. "The lead analyst on the Braxton account just quit. The project is a mess. It needs someone who can see the pattern in the chaos. It is 60-hour weeks for the next 3 months. High visibility, high stakes. Do you want it?" She was not offering me pity. She was not offering me time off. She was offering me a challenge. She was offering me a chance to be what I was, a damn good analyst. "Yes," I said, picking up the file. "I want it." I walked out of her office and felt 2 inches taller. That Friday, I had my first appointment at Maple Ridge Wellness, a therapy practice in a quiet building on the other side of town. Harper had given me the referral. My therapist was a man named Dr. Elias, who had a kind face and did not say much, which I appreciated. He just listened. I talked for 50 minutes straight. I told him about the house, the stove, the party, the power of attorney. "And now," he said, as our time was ending, "where are you?" I thought for a minute. I thought about the cream-colored walls, and the hissing radiator, and the list on my fridge. "I am in an apartment where I am learning to cook," I said. I finally realized what happened. For my entire life, they had me tethered to a cold stove, yelling at me because I was not providing any warmth. At the party, my grandfather did not just turn off the stove, he cut the gas line. I looked at him. So, I left, I found a new place, and I'm building my own. It is just an electric one, for now, but I am learning to light it. I turned off the old stove, and I am turning on my own. Walt came by, as promised. He showed up one Sunday morning, unannounced, with a bag from a local bakery. He did not ask about my father, or Lydia, or the house. He just handed me a loaf of fresh sourdough. It was still warm from the oven. "Every stove needs good bread," he said. We sat at my small kitchen table, eating toast and drinking black tea. He gave me no grand advice, no lectures. He just talked about the birds in his backyard in Arizona. When he left, I stood at the window of Linden 3B and watched him get into his cab. The apartment was quiet, filled with the smell of toast and the light of a new afternoon. I was warm. It was not the fierce, angry, performative fire of the Wolf Range. It was the slow, steady, quiet warmth of the radiator. It was the heat from the kettle, the glow from the simple burner. It was the warmth of bread. It was the first real heat I had ever felt, and it was coming from the inside. Riverton is a town built on mirrors. We live by reflection. My lawn reflects your lawn. Your car reflects your neighbor's car. And your family's success is a mirror held up to the entire, perfect, manicured street. The party at Aspen Court was not just a crack in the mirror, it was a sledgehammer. And Riverton, a town that abhors a vacuum, filled the silence with words. The gossip began before the police cars had even pulled away, before Lydia and Mark had found a hotel that would accept their now frozen credit cards. The gossip was fast, digital, and brutal. Mrs. Dalton, it turned out, was not just a horrified neighbor. She was the administrator of the Riverton Moms social media group, a forum with 3,000 members. The video she had discreetly filmed from her hip, the one capturing Walt's arrival, the audio of my father's desperate voice from the laptop, Lydia's shriek, and Walt's final, devastating line, was posted before she had even reached the end of our driveway. She had posted it under the caption, "Prayers for the Chavez family. Such a difficult time." It was the Riverton equivalent of dropping a bomb and running. By morning, the news was not just a rumor. It was a data file, shared, downloaded, and dissected at every coffee shop and country club bar. "The Chavez family is no longer perfect." That was the headline. The perfect blended family, the one Lydia had curated with the precision of a museum exhibit, was a forgery. The digital footprint was immediate. The video, grainy and chaotic, was bad. But the audio, the crystal clear recording of my father and Lydia plotting to take my money, was the kill shot. Within 48 hours, the internet, in its infinite and terrible wisdom, had remixed the event. A short, 6-second clip began to circulate. First among the high school kids, then everywhere. It was a close-up, shaky shot of my grandfather's weathered hand reaching for the knob. The click, the whoosh of the flame dying. It was overlaid with bold white text. The meme was born. "Turn off the lies." It became the default reply for any online post in our community that was deemed inauthentic. A local politician posted about his commitment to fiscal responsibility. Someone replied with the video. A local influencer posted a candid makeup-free selfie. "Turn off the lies." It was Riverton's new catchphrase for hypocrisy. The fallout for my family was not a slow decline. It was a guillotine. Lydia was the first to fall. She was, at the time, the chair of the annual Riverton Charity Gala, the single most important social event of the year. The board, composed of women exactly like her, women who lived in their own glass houses, could not abide a crack in their own facade. They called an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. the next day. Lydia was not invited. By 10, she was no longer on the board. The statement, released by Mrs. Dalton, was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive sympathy. Ms. Lydia Chavez has stepped down from her role to focus on pressing family matters. We wish her well and are moving forward. They had erased her. Mark's fall was quieter but more profound. The consulting he did was entirely dependent on the illusion of his former power. The men he golfed with, the ones who still had real jobs at real banks, could not be associated with a man who was not only broke, but who had been caught on tape attempting to defraud his own daughter via a voice-activated speaker. It was not the immorality that bothered them. It was the incompetence. He was suspended from his consulting firm, a firm that was really just a desk in his friend's office, pending an internal review. The review would be permanent. And Caleb, the golden boy, the entire reason for the party, the scandal had his name all over it. The prestigious internship was with a wealth management firm. That firm, it turned out, had a morals and ethics clause. A viral video of your stepmother assaulting your stepsister and your father being exposed for financial abuse was a violation of that clause. The offer was rescinded via email, citing unforeseen publicity and a misalignment of values. His friends, the ones who had clapped him on the back and looked forward to riding in the Audi, vanished. They did not call. They did not text. He was no longer a source of status. He was a liability. His scholarship, which had been tied to the internship, evaporated. I, on the other hand, was suddenly visible. I was still in my quiet, safe apartment. I was still working on the Braxton account at Northbury, but the town now saw me. 2 days after the party, a small, elegant greeting card was slipped under my door at Linden 3B. There was no return address. I opened it. It was from Mr. Dalton, the neighbor who had stopped Caleb. The card was blank inside, save for a few lines of thick, black ink. Ms. Chavez, what I witnessed was an act of profound courage. My wife and I have lived in Riverton for 30 years. We have seen many things, but we have rarely seen the truth. You did what every person in this town is afraid to do. You spoke it. Do not let them dim your light. Godspeed. The digital world, which had been so cruel to them, was strangely kind to me. A week after the party, a post appeared on a national women's forum, one dedicated to financial independence. It was titled, "My name is Hope, and I just turned off the stove." It was not my post, but it was my story, retold by someone who had clearly seen the video and read the comments. It was a narrative, a call to arms. "I am the quiet one who paid the bills," the anonymous author wrote. "I am the one who was told to be grateful. I am the one who was supposed to be the backdrop. Last night, I stepped into the light." The post went viral. It was shared thousands of times. Women from all over the country started replying with their own stories. "I am Hope, and I just took my name off the mortgage. I am Hope, and I just opened my own bank account. I am Hope, and I just said no for the first time." My small, specific trauma had become a symbol. Walt, from his home in Arizona, saw this. He was not a man for social media, but he understood symbols. He called Harper Pike. 2 weeks after the party, her law firm issued a small press release. It announced the formation of a new, small philanthropic fund. It was called the Blue Flame Fund. Its mission was simple: to provide pro bono legal aid and emergency grants to victims of in-family financial abuse and coercion. The first donation, a substantial one, had been made by Walt Chavez. The fund's tagline was simple: "For when you need to light your own fire." I did not want to be a symbol. I just wanted to finish the Braxton project and apply for my master's. But I received an email from my old high school in Riverton. They asked if I would be willing to speak to the senior class, not as a victim, but as an analyst. The topic was ethical boundaries and personal data. I said yes. I stood on the small stage in the auditorium I had sat in as a student, and I talked. I did not mention my family. I did not mention the party. I talked about data. I talked about how your signature is a data point, how your credit score is a data point, how no is the most powerful piece of data you own. I told them that their self-respect was their most valuable asset, and that they should never, ever let anyone else co-sign on it. The old world, of course, was still thrashing. Lydia, from whatever hotel she was in, was still trying to control the narrative. She took to social media. She posted a photo of her, Mark, and Caleb from 5 years ago, all smiling on a ski lift. Her caption was a masterpiece of victim blaming. "It has been a difficult time," she wrote. "We have been betrayed by those we loved most, and our family's private pain has been made public. But we endure. We know that family is about forgiveness, and we are holding out our hearts, waiting for an apology. We will heal. We will forgive." The comments section was a war zone. The first reply, from an anonymous account, was simple. "That's lovely, but what about an apology for the financial abuse and the assault?" The comment got 500 likes before Lydia disabled the comments on her entire account. Mark tried a different, more predictable route. He tried to sue. He filed a countersuit against me, against Walt, against Harper Pike. He claimed defamation, emotional distress, and unlawful interference in his family. It was a pathetic, desperate move. Harper Pike's response was not even a full hearing. She simply filed a motion to dismiss, Attaching one document, Article 4 of the Walt Chavez Trust, the anti-coercion clause, the clause that my father had, by his own actions, triggered. The judge took one look at the clause, which explicitly forbade legal challenges as a form of further coercion, and dismissed the entire case with prejudice. Mark was not even allowed to refile. The media came calling, local news, national morning shows, women's magazines. They all wanted the Hope Chavez story. They wanted the tears, the confrontation, the sordid details of the Riverton elite. I declined every single one. I was not a daytime TV spectacle. I was a data analyst. But I did write it down. I wrote it all down, not as a tell-all, but as an essay, a case study. I titled it The Stove and the Signature, a data-driven analysis of emancipation. I did not send it to a magazine. I sent it as my application essay for my master's program. The mirror in Riverton had not just cracked, it had changed. The town was still obsessed with appearances, but for the first time, people were talking about what was behind the reflection. Women I had known my whole life, women on Lydia's committees, were quietly calling Harper Pike's office. They were asking for asset reviews. They were opening their own post office boxes. Riverton was still a town that wanted to save face, but people were starting to whisper a new, radical idea. They were starting to learn that sometimes the only way to save your own face is to finally, publicly, and decisively say no. The Braxton Project at Northbury became my fortress. I threw myself into the data, finding solace in the clean, logical patterns, the problems that could be solved with algorithms and not with screaming. My apartment at Linden 3B was my sanctuary. It was quiet, it was warm, and it was mine. I had been accepted into the master's program. My life was moving forward, a clean, new data set. But the old, corrupted data was still thrashing. Harper Pike called me one Tuesday. Her voice was all business. "Hope, they're desperate." "What now?" I asked, leaning against my cream-colored wall, looking at my cactus. "Mark has been making inquiries. Stupid ones. He's been asking around, trying to find a notary who is flexible. He's trying to find someone who will backdate a document. He's trying to manufacture a new power of attorney, claiming you signed it before the party." "That's insane," I said, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. "That's outright fraud." "That's desperation," Harper corrected. "They're out of money, out of social capital, and their legal options are zero. The hearing for the permanent protection order is in 2 weeks, and they know they have no defense. They are cornered animals. Hope, and cornered animals are stupid, but they're also dangerous." She was right. The call came 3 days later. It was an unknown number. I was working from home, analyzing a regression model, and I almost let it go to voicemail, but a prickle of unease made me answer. "Hello?" Silence, and then a sound I barely recognized, a wet, broken sob. "Hope?" It was Lydia, but it was not the Lydia I knew. The sharp, commanding, gardenia-scented matriarch was gone. This was a weak, pathetic, weeping woman. "Hope, honey, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't hang up. I know I don't deserve it. But your father? Oh, God. Hope, your father." It was the most brilliant performance of her life. "He's not well. Hope," she cried. "He's not eating. He's a broken man. He just sits in the hotel room and stares at the wall. He says he's lost his little girl. He says he's lost everything. I've been so wrong. I see that now. I was just trying so hard for Caleb. I pushed too hard. I was a monster. I know that." I stood silent, my hand gripping the phone. My heart was pounding. This was a new variable, a calculated plea to the old me, the fixer, the peacemaker. "What do you want, Lydia?" "One dinner," she said, the words rushing out. "Please, Hope, just one last meal. At the house. The bank hasn't taken it. Yet. Your father. He just wants to apologize. Properly. No lawyers. No one else. Just family. One last time. So we can say we're sorry. A reconciliation. Please. Hope. It might be the only thing that saves him. It was a perfect trap. It was aimed directly at the part of me that had been trained, for 27 years, to absorb their pain and call it love. I have to go, I said, my voice thick. I have to think about it. I hung up before she could reply. My hands were shaking. The old conditioned reflex was strong. The urge to fix it. I dialed Harper, then I dialed Walt. Harper was cold, logical. It's a trap. Hope, 100%. They've been served with the permanent injunction hearing date. This is a last-ditch, Hail Mary, effort to get your signature on something before they lose in court for good. Do not go. Walt, whom I'd called on a crackling line to Arizona, had a different take. I heard him sigh, a sound like dry leaves. I'll be on the next flight, he said. He arrived the next morning, his face grim. We met at Harper's office, a sleek, glass and steel conference room that felt a world away from Lydia's desperate, sobbing call. She called me again, I told them, my voice quiet. She said to come tonight, 8 o'clock. You're not going, Harper said, tapping a pen on a legal pad. Yes, she is, Walt said. Harper and I both looked at him. When they say reconciliation, Walt said, his eyes finding mine, it just means they're preparing to make you bow. They don't want peace. They want surrender. They don't want to apologize. They want you to retract. They're going to try to trick you into signing something. They're stupid, and they're desperate. Then she is absolutely not going, Harper said, aghast. She is, Walt said, because we're going with her. They've already violated the temporary order by contacting her. They've set their own trap. Harper, it's time we let them spring it. The plan was assembled with the cold precision of a military operation. Harper made a call to the Riverton Police Department. The temporary protection order was already a matter of record. Lydia's reconciliation call was a clear violation. We met, 3 hours later, with 2 plainclothes detectives. One was a sharp woman named Detective Miller. This is textbook, Miller said, after I relayed Lydia's plea. The final act of the coercer. They try to play the victim. They lure you in with a promise of closure. We can't go in with you, Ms. Chavez, but we can be very, very close. We'll have a 2-man car on the street, monitoring. That's not good enough, Harper said. If they get her inside, they could try anything. They could physically force her to sign. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small object. It looked like a standard key fob for a high-end car. They'll ask you to leave your purse. Hope, they won't let you have your phone. Put this in your pocket. It's a live-feed audio transmitter. It's also recording. In Colorado. This is perfectly legal, as you are a party to this conversation and you consent. The panic button, she said, pointing to the red circle, is not for a car. It's a silent alert. It pings my phone and the one I'm giving to Detective Miller. We'll have a team on the lawn, in the dark. If you press that, or if we hear a single word of a threat, we are through the door in less than 30 seconds. And me? Walt asked. You're the witness, Harper said. You're the one who validates the narrative. You'll be with me and the detectives, in the van. You'll hear everything. I walked up the stone path to my old house alone. It was the longest walk of my life. The house was dark, except for the warm, inviting lights of the kitchen, glowing like a stage set. I had the key fob in the right pocket of my coat. I knocked. Mark opened the door. The man I saw shocked me. He had aged 10 years. He was not the powerful, performative man in the linen apron. He was a shell. His face was gray and unshaven, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. He wore a stained polo shirt and old slacks. Hope, he whispered, his voice wet with a terrible, false emotion. Oh, God. Hope, you came. You came. He reached out to hug me. I put a hand up, gently. Not yet, Dad. Of course, he said, stepping back, wringing his hands. Lydia, she's in the kitchen. She's cooking. For you. Hope, darling. Lydia's voice, a high, brittle facsimile of warmth, floated out. Is that you? Oh, come in. Come in. Leave your bag by the door. Honey? And your coat? Let's just be comfortable. Just us. I'll keep my coat on, I said. It's cold. Mark flinched but nodded. Of course. I walked into the kitchen, and my blood ran cold. It was a recreation. It was a threat. The smell was the same. Seared steak, rich, smoky, and nauseating. The gleaming wolf range was on. Not all 8 burners, just one, a single, blue flame, hissing quietly under a cast-iron pan. The air was thick with the pretense of a meal, with the heavy cloying scent of a lie. Sit, honey, Lydia said. She, too, was in a costume, not the silk blouse of a hostess, but a simple Samaya's sweater, the penitent look. She was stirring a sauce, her back to me. And then I saw the third player, Caleb. He was not at the island. He was not waiting for his gift. He was standing by the door to the garage, the door that led to the outside world, to the driveway. His arms were crossed. He was not the arrogant, preening golden boy. He was a guard. His face was pale. His eyes were dead. And he looked at me with a pure, undiluted contempt that was almost a physical force. He was blocking the only exit. Your father wanted to make things right, Lydia murmured, not turning around. Mark, his hands visibly shaking, slid a small stack of papers onto the quartz island. On top of them, he placed a cheap ballpoint pen. Hope, he stammered. We just need to fix this. For all of us. I looked at the papers. It was not a complex trust document. It was a single, badly photocopied page. General power of attorney, broad, absolute, and final. Beneath it was a second document, a retraction, a typed statement that the events of the party were a complete misunderstanding, caused by my emotional distress and confusion, and that I fully and completely retracted all accusations against my father, my stepmother, and my stepbrother. Lydia turned. Her eyes were not red from crying. They were bright, hard, and desperate. She walked over and placed her hand on mine, her skin cold as ice. Please, Hope, she whispered. Just sign it. We can't go on like this. It's just a formality. It's so we can start to heal. Just sign. For our peace of mind. Just sign the damn papers. Hope, Caleb snarled from the doorway. His voice was a low, ugly hiss. You've ruined everything. Stop being a selfish bitch and just sign it so we can fix this. The reconciliation was over. The trap was sprung. Mark pushed the pen into my hand. My fingers, cold, closed around it. This was the moment, the final data point. I looked at my father. A trembling, broken coward. I looked at Lydia, a predator in a cashmere costume. I looked at Caleb, the bitter, resentful guard. I looked at the hissing, single blue flame on the stove. The room was silent, waiting. I lifted the pen. I held it over the signature line. Mark let out a small, hopeful breath. Then, very deliberately, I placed the pen down on the counter, next to the papers. I looked up and met my father's eyes. No. Lydia's face, the mask of the penitent, cracked. What? What did you say? I said no, I repeated. My voice was not the small, shaky voice from the old recordings. It was the voice of the lead analyst on the Braxton Project. It was firm. It was final. I am not signing these, and I am not afraid of you anymore. You ungrateful, Lydia shrieked, her hand, the one with the blood-red nails, flying up, not to grab, but to strike. A hand caught her wrist mid-air. Not this time, Lydia. It was Walt. He had not come in the front door. He had not come in the back. He had simply appeared, a shadow detaching itself from the darker hallway. He must have slipped in while they were all focused on me. A ghost in his own son's house. Lydia screamed, a sound of pure terror. Mark fell back against the counter, gasping. Caleb, by the door, actually took a step back. Walt did not look at them. He released Lydia's wrist, shoving her hand away in disgust. He walked past them, his face carved from granite. He walked straight to the hissing, defiant, single-flamed burner. "I am so tired," he said, his voice heavy with a profound, final exhaustion, "of this goddamned stove." He reached out his hand. Tap, he hit the steel. Click. For the second, and the last, time, the blue flame died. "It's over, Mark," he said. And as if he had spoken a command, the kitchen door, the one Caleb was guarding, burst open. "Police, nobody move!" Detective Miller and her partner came through, their faces hard. Lydia shrieked again, a sound of pure animal panic. Harper Pike walked in right behind them. She was not holding a laptop. She was holding a single, folded, official-looking document. "Lydia Chavez, Mark Chavez, Caleb Holt," Harper said, her voice ringing out in the kitchen. "You are in direct, flagrant violation of an emergency protection order. You have engaged in witness tampering, harassment, and conspiracy to commit fraud." She tapped her ear. "Detective, that key fob in Ms. Chavez's pocket is a live recording, and it has just captured every single word of this extortion. You," she pointed to Caleb, "were facilitating a false imprisonment. You," she pointed to Mark and Lydia, "were attempting to coerce a signature. It is all, as they say, on tape." Caleb, seeing the officers, made a bolt for the garage. "I wouldn't," Miller said, and her voice had an edge that made the boy freeze in his tracks. Harper walked to the island. She unfolded her document and slapped it down on top of Mark's pathetic, fraudulent papers. "And this," she announced to the room, "is the permanent 5-year restraining order. The judge signed it this afternoon, contingent on this final act of harassment. This dinner was just the confirmation. You will have no contact. You will have no proximity. This house, an asset of the trust, will be seized and sold tomorrow to cover the damages you have caused." And then, the light. The front door was open. The reporter who had been following the Turn Off the Lies story, alerted by Harper's office, was there. The flashbulbs erupted, a series of bright, sterile pops, turning the kitchen into a chaotic, overexposed tableau. The flashes captured it all. Lydia, her hand half raised, her mouth open in a silent scream. Mark, sliding down the cabinets, his face in his hands, a broken, defeated man. Caleb, hands raised, surrendering to the officer, a look of pure, stupid shock on his face. This was not a kitchen. It was not a home. It was a trial, and the verdict was finally, irrevocably, in. The flashbulbs were a merciless, strobe-like interrogation, popping in a relentless rhythm, bleaching the kitchen in harsh, cold light. Each flash captured another frame of the tableau. Detective Miller with her hand on Caleb's arm. My father, Mark, crumpled against the white lacquer cabinets. Lydia, frozen, her hand still half raised, her face a grotesque mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. Harper Pike stood in the center of the storm, a pillar of calm, legal precision. The permanent restraining order was still in her hand, held up like a final decree. "Let me be perfectly clear. Mark, Lydia," she announced, her voice cutting through the ringing silence after the flashes. "Your actions tonight, the harassment, the attempted fraud, the false imprisonment, all recorded, have triggered the final penalty clause of the trust. Your violation of the emergency order, your attempts to coerce, they don't just lose you the lawsuit, they mean you have forfeited, permanently, any and all secondary benefits, stipends, or claims. You have lost all rights." Detective Miller, her notebook now closed, gestured to the front door. "Mr. Chavez, Ms. Chavez, you're not being arrested tonight. Yet, the district attorney will be reviewing Ms. Pike's evidence for a criminal fraud case, but as of this moment, you are trespassing. This is my home, Mark whispered, his voice a hoarse, broken sound. Not anymore, Harper said, her voice devoid of sympathy. The trust, which Ms. Chavez now solely controls, owns this property. The locks will be changed in 1 hour. You have 5 minutes to collect your wallets, your medication, and your keys. Then you will be escorted off the premises. The detective turned to them. Your keys. Now. House keys. Car keys. The ones for the cars in the garage. They are assets of the estate. Hand them to me. Slowly, like a man in a dream. My father reached into his pocket. The jingle of the keys. A sound I had heard every day of my life. The sound of his arrival was now the sound of his eviction. He dropped them into the detective's outstretched hand. Lydia was a statue. Lydia, your keys, the detective repeated, more firmly. Lydia's eyes were locked on me. They were not sad. They were not defeated. They were wells of pure, black, bottomless hatred. She would never forgive. She would never understand. She had lost, and her only remaining emotion was fury. Lydia, Detective Miller warned. With a sudden, violent, reptilian movement, Lydia's hands flew to her own throat. She was not choking. She was grabbing the double strand of pearls she always wore, the ones Mark had given her for their first anniversary. With a single, convulsive yank, she ripped them from her neck. The string snapped. Pearls, white and luminous, scattered everywhere. They bounced off the quartz island. They skittered across the hardwood floor. They rolled under the gleaming, called-on appliances. The sound was a rapid, cascading patter. Like a sudden, hard rain, it was the sound of the last, final, glittering lie coming apart. She did not cry. She just let out a single, sharp, exhaled breath, a sound of utter defeat. Then she, too, dropped her keys into the officer's hand. Caleb was quiet. He was just a boy, a tall, pale, terrified boy who had been told he was a king, and who had just watched his kingdom, his parents, and his future dissolve in a series of flashbulbs. He watched his mother, her neck bare and red. He watched his adoptive father, a man he had emulated, being told to leave his own house. He turned his head and saw his own reflection in the dark. Dead glass of the Wolf Range oven, a distorted, hollow-eyed stranger. He just stared, his entire world shattered in the glass. "Let's go," Detective Miller said. They were led out. My father, Mark, stopped at the threshold of the kitchen. He was shaking. He looked at me, not with hatred, not with anger, but with a terrible, uncomprehending pity that was all for himself. "Hope," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You did this. You destroyed us. You destroyed your whole family." I looked at him, at this shell of a man, at this father who had seen me only as a utility, as a line of credit. The old, familiar sting of obligation was gone. The old fear was gone. There was only clarity. "No, Dad," I said, and my voice was not angry. It was just true. "I didn't. You did. You built this house. You lit the fire, and you just kept feeding it. Even when you ran out of wood, you started burning the furniture. You started burning the people." I pointed to the dead stove, its burners cold and dark. "You burned yourselves. I just stopped you from burning me, too." He had no answer. He just sagged, and the detective gently guided him out the door. And then they were gone. The flashing lights vanished. The reporters were held at bay on the lawn. The house, which had been a stage of such high, terrible drama, was suddenly, profoundly quiet. The only people left in the kitchen were me, Walt, and Harper. The air was thick with the smell of the seared, uncooked steak, a congealing monument to their final, failed performance. Harper Pike closed her briefcase with a satisfied click. "Well," she said, "that concludes the hostile negotiation. I'll have a security team here in 30 minutes to begin the asset inventory. The locks will be changed by midnight. You won't have to set foot in here again. Hope, unless you want to. I looked around the kitchen, the white cabinets, the gleaming steel, the scattered pearls, like small, hard tears on the floor. I said. I never want to see this place again. Good, Walt said. He stepped forward. He had not said a word during the entire final confrontation. He had just stood, a silent, immovable presence, and watched justice be done. He reached into his tweed coat, the one he had worn that first night. He pulled out a file, not a thick manila envelope of legal threats, a thin, simple, blue folder. Linden 3B, he said. The apartment. I did not want you to worry about the lease running out. I opened it. It was a deed, a transfer of ownership. He had not rented the apartment. He had bought it, and now he had signed it over, fully and completely, to me. Walt, I whispered, the word thick in my throat. I can't. You can, he said simply. It's not a gift. Hope, it's a foundation. Every house built on lies falls. This one, he tapped the folder, is built on brick. It'll hold. It's yours. He looked at me, and his eyes, those clear, piercing blue eyes, were soft for the first time. You have learned the hardest lesson, kid. You have learned to light the stove at the right time, but you learned to light it with reason, not with fear. That's a fire that never burns the house down. It just keeps it warm. He put his hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you. We walked out the front door. The air was cold and sharp. The Riverton night was silent. The police cars were gone. The reporters were gone. But there were figures standing on the lawn. It was the neighbors, Mr. Dalton, his wife, a dozen other people from the cul-de-sac. They were standing in their driveways, in their bathrobes and coats, drawn by the commotion. They were not filming. They were not whispering. As I walked down the stone path, with Walt's hand on my shoulder, they just watched. And then, Mr. Dalton. The man who had stopped Caleb. The man who had spoken the truth. He just nodded, a single, slow, deep nod of respect. And then his wife did. And then another neighbor. It was not applause. It was not a celebration. It was something quieter and more profound. It was an acknowledgement. It was the sound of a mirror turning, for the first time, into a window. Before I got in Walt's car, I turned and looked back at the house one last time. The stone facade, the dark windows. I thought about the stove inside, the one that had been the center of my entire life's trauma. I pictured the knob. I pictured turning it on. The click, the whoosh, the blue flame. And then I pictured just walking away. I smiled, a small, real smile. Cold food tastes pretty good tonight, I said, mostly to myself. The warmth is inside. I got in the car. I did not look back. The final scene is not in that house. It is in my house, Linden 3B. It is 3 months later. The walls are cream. The cactus, resilient, has a tiny bright pink flower blooming on its side. My master's degree acceptance letter is framed, hanging on the wall. The Blue Flame Fund is no longer just an idea. It is a registered nonprofit. Harper Pike sits on the board, and I, Hope Chavez, am listed as its first director. We have already helped 3 women get their own emergency protection orders. It is a Sunday. It is snowing outside. Fat, quiet flakes against the old brick. My small kitchen is warm. I'm not making a feast. I am just living. I set my kettle on the electric stove. I turn the knob. The coil glows a steady, happy, quiet orange, while I wait for the water to boil. I sit at my small table with my journal. It is not a legal pad of grievances. It is a new, clean book. I write a few lines, thinking about the journey, about the noise of that old kitchen, and the quiet of this new one. I write one last line. Ever since the old stove was turned off, I can finally hear myself simmering. The kettle begins to whistle, a high, clear, happy sound. I get up to make my tea. The apartment is filled with the golden, late afternoon light, catching the steam from the kettle, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. It is a small fire. It is an honest fire. And it is a fire that will never, ever go out. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment below so we can connect and you can share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.